Hello and welcome to the Twowaymarkets weekly market focus. This is the technical part of it and sponsored by Trend Signal. So what we're going to do is have a look through the charts as per normal, some of the main currencies, indices and commodities that we and our clients tend to trade the most. So what I'm actually going to do is start off with gold to begin with. So looking at the gold futures, just because I want to recap on something we talked about last week. First of all, we've seen the market rally last week over the last 5 daily charts. It's a daily chart of the gold futures. We've seen it move up quite convincingly, but of course, it didn't start off the week like that. And actually, at the beginning of the week, we had Monday, Tuesday here, the market pulled back quite convincingly. So it's interesting to look at that and the numbers that I talked about last week. I talked about support and I talked about resistance last week. Talked about support in this 1690 area, as referred to by Trend Signal here, our software, 1689 spot 4. The market hit that on the Tuesday, and then subsequently the market then rallied and hit that resistance up at 1763. So the market's behaved perfectly, I have to say, last week on gold. As I look at 1763, why there? Because that's very much the top of that price envelope there, the top of the natural trading range on that market there. That's actually led to a lot of resistance on a number of markets over the last week or so. So really interesting on gold. As I look through it now, there's quite a bit of support and resistance on all of this. And obviously, in terms of resistance, looking at this daily chart, we're really looking at it being quite a long way away now. As I look to this number here, really for the daily chart, 1824 spot 8, that's quite a long way away, really because of the speed at which the market fell back in September. There isn't really much resistance beyond this area here, so if it does continue to rally, it may well rally up to this area. So that's 1824, that next area there. In terms of support, really what we can look for is at the 4-hour chart there to give us a little bit of guidance there. So what we're looking at there for support in the 1747 area, it's quite near this little red pivot point here, following the same principle of what we had as support earlier last week. So this red pivot point, now that we've taken it out, could well act as decent support. That's the 1747 area there. So that could well come into play as a decent level as we move through the week. Okay, so that's gold. I look through to the other commodities. We'll start off with crude oil. I have to say, looking at the daily chart, crude oil does look toppy, and looks like it may be running out of steam today as well. Resistance in the sort of 99.30 area there, as I just compress the chart up a little bit, we start to see those resistance zones up here. See the top pivot point here, this red line there. So if the market does rally significantly, we'll look to it to get to the top of those July highs, that 99.30 area there. We could also look to other areas a bit more nearer term, perhaps to the top of the envelope here, that sort of 96.50 area here would also look as resistance. As far as support goes, I'm actually going to have to refer to the 4-hour chart here to look for those support areas there. Support at 90.78, so we're looking at these sort of areas here, 90.28 rather, these areas here in the 4-hour chart there. That's the next level of support that I really see, or we really see on crude oil there. Let's have a look through some currencies now. So we're going to start off with the euro US dollar. So to begin with, the market has started to move down in line with that monthly chart. So we had a really nice sell trade throughout all October, and now the market's giving us a sell a little bit last week, and the market now starting to pull back a little bit in line with that. Support, looking at the daily chart, 132.57, a long way off, right down at the bottom here from where the market rallied. It's a real significant area of support there. It's a long way away. It probably won't get there in a week, but it's certainly something for the radar if you are looking to go short, or indeed looking to go long on euro dollar. In terms of resistance on this daily chart, looking around this area here, this 141.65 area there, you see where this pivot point is there, this little number that's automatically plotted, could again come into play. Let's refer to the 4-hour chart. Let's have a look at some of the numbers there, just to give you some more support and resistance levels and maybe a bit nearer. Certainly resistance, 138.71 is an area that I've identified, this green number here. We got quite close to it at the end of last week, and it may well come into play as the week goes on. And then, of course, in terms of support, if you really want something that's a little more near term, you can see what we've been having here, 136.62. The markets tried to get through it last week. 1, 2, 3, 4 times it tried to pierce this level, failed, and it'll be interesting to see how price reacts if and when we test back down to that 136.62 area on euro dollar. Moving forward to sterling US dollar. Again, looking at the daily chart, we've had a sell signal on this as well. And the market is now nicely moving low. We had a sell on Friday, and here we are. I don't know, some 40, 50 points or so. It's hardly moved down a lot, but certainly moving in the right direction there, which is in line with that monthly trend direction there. It's really not been as weak as the euro. Sterling dollar, it's certainly been a lot more resilient. And but looking to support and resistance, first of all, resistance areas, 161.08, 161.11, something like that. This pivot point here, it's a little bit impeded by the candlestick. It's difficult for you to see, but 161.11 there is the pivot point reading there. So that'll be an interesting level. And in terms of support, I'm just going to refer to the 4-hour chart. I really like the 4-hour chart. It gives me really nice areas of support and resistance there. I'm really able to assess those intraday trends really nicely. In terms of support, we're really looking for this to test this area here. So this most previous support point, 158.94, that could really come into play. If you're looking for markets to really dump from here, then what we can really do is compress the chart up, and we start to see something a little bit further down. 156.83, that's the next major low that we had, 18th of October. If this market really does dump, expect this area to come into play, 156.83. It's a long way away yet, but you know, as last week showed, these markets sometimes move very, very far in a week, and you just never know. Okay, so just going to move on to the indices before I finish. So first of all, looking at FTSE, we've had a sell on the dailies, moving down quite nicely. Again, like those currency pairs, it is very much in line with the monthly chart as well there. You know, in terms of support areas, let's just quickly refer to the 4-hour chart there, just to give you some of those support areas here. You can see very clearly the support in this 53.75, 53.80 area, those pivot point here and here. Combination of pivot points, a lot of support in this area here, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens. We're trying to get down there today. We had a big pullback today already, down about sort of 76 points or so on the FTSE cash. You know, a bit of support there. It'll be interesting to see what happens. It may tear straight through it, I really don't know, but it's a key level that we've hit a number of times on FTSE there. I have to say, looking really through to the longer term, we're looking at this sort of 51.20 as a next area, but that's going to involve a big fall on FTSE to get there. But as I said, you just never know. Not when we've got all this going on in the economic backdrop in Europe at the moment. So you know, it's always interesting to have these numbers on your watch list. Okay, resistance areas on the FTSE. Just looking immediately up at the previous pivot point, 55.75. 55.73 here, this area likely to come into play, and then obviously 57.18. These previous pivot zones are very, very important when we look for our trading areas, to look at key areas for potential support, key areas for potential resistance there. And then just finally, the S&P 500, the US index. Again, sell signal on dailies, again, in line with the monthly charts. So we seem to be resuming that more dominant trend from those monthly charts. You know, in terms of support, I really can't look down to here just yet at 1093. I mean, that really would be a ludicrous move. But you know, this market really does dump. This will end up in future recordings, going to be a likely point. But in the meantime, let's just very much look down to about 1215 is the first area here. It's not that far away. We've tried it a couple of times, this pivot area here. We've tried it once, twice, 3 times, and failed to break through last week. So it'll be interesting to see if we test it again this week, if we'll find similar support off that area there. Really easy to identify these areas are using those pivot point areas there. And again, just looking at resistance zones here, really what we want to have a look at is around this 1280 area, 1278 area on this daily chart here. Oops, this 1278.5 area there on this daily chart. Once again, those pivot points proving very useful when we look at those support and resistance target areas there. Good. Okay. Well, thanks very much for listening to this week's forecast for the week commencing the 7th of November. Have a good week's trading, and hopefully you'll be back listening to the next session next week. Thank you very much, and goodbye.